Quarantine is far from over. Many people are sick, others are unemployed, and no one was prepared for this. Through the sudden crisis, both houses agreed on the CARES Act relatively quickly, which historically gave stimulus checks to Americans. 2 updates have been proposed, and we're now waiting for something to pass. In this video, I want to talk about the young people who were left behind. 18 to 24-year-olds didn't get stimulus, along with elderly dependents, people with disabilities who were claimed on somebody else's taxes, and 17-year-olds. Let's start off with some context that explains why 17 to 24-year-olds were financially interrupted by the pandemic. Arguably, they were one of the hardest hit groups overall. Despite what the CARES Act assumes, young people definitely work. Fewer teenagers have jobs today than what has historically been the case, but about a third of them work according to CNBC. About 70% of college students have jobs, according to a study done by Georgetown University in 2018. Another 2018 report by the Brookings Institute says that of the 14.8 million 18 to 24-year-olds in the US that aren't in school, 10.2 million are working, which is 68.9%. This age group works a lot of low-wage, frontline positions. Many of the jobs young people fill were the first to go during quarantine. Sit-down restaurants, movie theaters, retail, and university-sponsored work programs have been hit hard. People aren't going out, so workers have been laid off, their hours have been reduced, or they've been told not to come back to work. The first stimulus checks would have been helpful to frontline workers who had their hours reduced, but don't qualify for unemployment. Another important group to mention is college students. They were evicted from their dorms with less than a week's notice to leave, and many people didn't get refunds for room and board. This wouldn't happen with any other group. Stimulus checks would have been important for students who weren't able to just show up at a family member's house with a few days' notice. They would also be helpful to international students who aren't able to pick up everything and move back to another country, especially with only a few days' notice. In addition, young people have had trouble accessing unemployment like many others. $1,200 checks could have helped people while they waited months for assistance. These reasons don't even mention the fact that many young adults live on their own and pay for their own expenses. What can we expect when none of our lawmakers have had this experience? Okay, so let's reiterate these things in a list. First, you were laid off, given reduced hours, or told not to come to work indefinitely. Second, if you kept going to work, you were at a high risk for getting COVID. Third, if you were a student, all your classes were moved online, even though that's not the service you paid for. Fourth, if you were living at a college, you were evicted on short notice, and after that, you struggled to get a refund for room and board. Fifth, even if you were eligible, you weren't able to access unemployment easily like many other people. And finally, you didn't get a stimulus check. Young Americans are dealing with the same issues everyone else is dealing with. The fact that they have been left out is disrespectful. We already addressed the question of how much to give individuals based on their income. The conclusion was to give everyone the same amount of money because the pandemic is a crisis and we have to do something now. So, what's coming up in the second round of stimulus for these dependents? The HEALS and the HEROES Acts are making some of the same mistakes. The Republican HEALS Act gives people $500 per dependent without an age cap on dependents, and the Democrat HEROES Act gives households $1,200 per dependent with a limit of 3. Right away, I see 2 annoying things about both these bills that just scream involuntary financial marriage. The first is that a dependent's ability to receive aid is entirely based on their claimant's income, kinda like FAFSA. The second is that the money will be given to the person who claimed them. How can we have an honest conversation about giving adult dependents coronavirus aid if we're going to operate on a system where we aren't going to actually send these people money? We don't even know if they're going to get it because we're sending it indirectly. Isn't the whole point of a stimulus check to give the person aid directly. Anyway, then you have the HEALS Act that only gives dependents $500. I feel like I don't even have to explain this, but you're gonna go to a whole age group, assume they don't have expenses, and give them less money than everybody else. In what other situation would we allow this? A lot of this might be about the difficulty of making these payments happen logistically and trying to separate people who cover almost none of their expenses from people who pay a decent amount. So once again, lawmakers are brushing these people to the side instead of actually doing their jobs. They're making broad assumptions about an age group that is far from homogenous. When we do this, we take the status of being adult away from this group, but we don't give them the protection of being a minor. While ignoring this vulnerable group, politicians were doing things like working out the Paycheck Protection program that ended up giving money to businesses owned by Kanye West and Ice Cube. They gave billions to strip clubs, politically affiliated businesses, and megachurches instead of helping young workers. They also gave a bunch of money to airlines and literally dead people. By the way, this is just what we know after pressure to release who got these so-called small business loans. According to CBS News, the vast majority of businesses that got money will remain private. Maybe we could justify this if the loans weren't forgivable. Maybe we could justify this if the loans actually mandated some sort of direct help from the employer to the employee. But these things aren't true. Basically, the government will give Kanye West a few million unrestricted dollars of indirect relief before giving adult dependents direct stimulus. They bailed out airlines, strip clubs, and Ice Cube before they considered giving low-income working dependents stimulus. You could agree or disagree on giving Kanye tax money, but maybe that doesn't matter. Maybe treating everybody the same is what matters. So, if we're going to operate on a system of bailing out rich people, we should also have to give 18 to 24-year-olds stimulus checks just like everyone else. Being financially independent is correlated with years in the workforce, but we cannot continue to assume the situation of a large group of people based on age. We cannot continue to base our assessment of dependent adults fully upon those who claim them. This is a disservice to youth and to those who claim young people on their tax returns.